Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and every year Apple announces a new version of iOS, going from iPhone OS 1 all the way up to iOS 18 last year. They announce this typically in June at WWDC or the Worldwide Developer Conference, share all of the latest upcoming operating systems, and then release them typically around September with the launch of the next iPhone. Last year, we started to hear about iOS 18 before the new year with rumors about what it had to offer. This year, we've had very little information until now, and it seems we now know why. iOS 19 is set to be one of the biggest changes in years, and so I wanted to share 5 things to expect so far. Now, as far as supported devices, this of course could change, but it looks like all of the same devices that are supported on iOS 18 may get support with iOS 19. That means everything back to the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR, all the way to the latest phones with the iPhone 16, 16e, 16 Pro, and of course future iPhone 17 models. So that's great news. Now again, this could change. We don't know this 100%, but we've heard a little bit of information about it. The big news, though, is 3 people so far have said that iOS 19 will get a full redesign. We've heard this for a few years at this point, and apparently iOS 18 was set to be the redesign, but Apple pushed it back due to Apple Intelligence. A website called The Verifier was the first to say iOS 19 would have a design inspired by visionOS. John Prosser talked about some redesigns, and now Mark Gurman is saying to expect the biggest design change since iOS 7. Now, typically when Mark Gurman shares that there's a change, he's fairly right when it comes to iOS. Sometimes he gets different dates off and things, or Apple changes them when it comes to hardware, but lately he's been spot on about iOS. So this is looking like it's confirmed by 3 different sources, and it looks like we could have a major change here. Recently, Mark Gurman went on a podcast with a few other people, such as John Rettinger and Andrew Edwards, and talked about what to expect a little bit. The first thing is consistency and unification on the design, specifically between iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. Right now, we have different icons on iOS compared to macOS, and iPadOS, of course, shares the iOS design as well. All of these things could be unified and have similar design languages and maybe even rounded icons. Now, that hasn't been confirmed by anyone. Some people have suggested it. We've heard that for years, but visionOS does have round icons. So we could see something like that, or maybe the option to change between that. The OS design is said to be loosely based on visionOS, meaning that we would have better transparency, translucency, maybe more depth, which I would definitely welcome. I was never a fan of iOS 7 flat design. We could have more depth, maybe more parallax effect, and just shadows and sort of things that make it a little bit nicer. visionOS looks great. I'm not a huge fan of how you interact using your eyes and your fingers. I prefer controllers with that, but the overall design of it is really great looking. So to see that carried across to iOS with consistency, I would definitely welcome it. Another thing Mark Gurman said is that it's a fundamental re-architecture of how the devices look and feel, meaning not basically the same layout we've had. We could have the same icon layout, but the overall interaction could be different. Similar to maybe what we have here with settings, but instead of having settings in one settings pane, maybe we'll have settings within each app. So maybe we'll have that a little bit where we do on the Mac. We have settings here, but we don't have all of the settings, and it's very inconsistent and a bit of a pain to figure out if you're not familiar with iOS. So to see that change, along with simplifying the way users navigate and control their devices, that's said to be a big change here. So again, that may hint maybe it's settings. We don't really know 100%, and we don't know if maybe we'll have a different control panel or anything else, but that's something I would definitely welcome. It's been a long time having the same sort of interactions in the way it works, and to see that refined would be welcome. The other thing Mark Gurman said is that it's designed for a new generation. Hopefully they don't mean like the Photos app where they've redesigned that. So if we go into it, we have a really odd design. Some people really don't like the overall design, and so hopefully it has some updates to this. They change photos and don't make the whole OS like this. If it's said to look more like visionOS, it probably won't have this overall look. But either way, that's something I'm excited about, and I can't wait to see what Apple comes up with here. As again, it's been a long time since we've seen something exciting from them as far as that goes. Now, one thing we've been waiting for a long time is Siri with context. Recently, Apple's been removing all of the mentions of this as they've sort of delayed it and made a statement that it's coming later on, as it may need to be re-architected, according to Mark Gurman. Internally, some people say it may be scrapped entirely and then rebuilt from the ground up, or it could just be something they fix. But either way, Siri has a long way to go to sort of match what Google is doing, ChatGPT, and others. So we have this nice animation, but everything else is really kind of lackluster and boring. So hopefully they fix that and update it and make it work properly. Another thing we can expect is new AirPods features, and one of those has to do with AirPods Pro or just AirPods in general, maybe allowing for live translation on the fly with different languages. We've seen this from other device manufacturers such as Google with Pixel, so to have that with AirPods would be great. Place them in your ears. If you don't speak Spanish, someone could speak Spanish and you'll hear English in your ears. And then you could reply and they could hear the same thing. So I think that would be great, and maybe we'll finally get an AirPods update page as well. Another thing we're expecting is some app redesigns. We saw this a little bit from what John Prosser showed with the camera, where it has a little bit of a change in the overall design. That's something I would welcome, but the overall design he showed doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it doesn't give me a ton of confidence that Apple would actually make it look like that, or maybe design the whole thing like that. So really, I would love to see some sort of design change throughout apps, just to make them more consistent, make them make more sense, and be easier and simpler to use. One thing we've had for years with iOS is you could just pick it up and use it. You could hand it to a child and they would figure it out. It's so convoluted and complicated and different throughout each app now that they really need to fix that. We're also going to get a staggered rollout this year, meaning we're going to have the same thing basically we've had for years, where Apple will show off features and then roll them out over time. Whether that's iOS 19.1 all the way to 19.5 or something else where they roll out those features. They've done this for years, so that makes a lot of sense. And the thing I want them to bring the most is stability. Stability is something it's lacked for quite some time. iOS was always known as the stable operating system. You could count on it, and now it's just a bug-riddled mess for the most part. Compared to what we've seen in the past, this is not what we expect from Apple. We're lacking features, we're lacking stability. I was using this the other day and it just completely crashed while I was using the camera. So I've seen some odd things. People are having issues with the new 16E with Bluetooth, so hopefully they've just been working really hard on iOS 19 to get everything right. The other thing we could see, of course, is a change with iPadOS and macOS. Again, with that same stability, maybe some more power features with split-screen multitasking coming from the iPad to the iPhone. Some different features like that I'm sure would be welcomed by many people. So a lot of these things we can expect, and macOS as well. So the good news is Apple is still working on macOS, not to change it and make it more like iPadOS, but just to have it be its own thing and then allow people to use it as needed. Now, as far as the release dates go, well, we can expect this in early June. Typically, Apple will send out invites for WWDC in March, so we could expect that pretty soon. But also, maybe we'll see this probably on June 9th. Typically, it's the second week of June where we see WWDC. At that point, we'll get iOS 19 Beta 1 for developers. We'll get a public beta, usually a week or two later, and then Apple will release it in September. So that's what I would expect this year. Of course, they can change that at any point, but that's what they typically do, and I would expect a similar release. At this point, many people have said iOS feels old or stale and just unreliable. The Apple Intelligence rollout has been quite a bit of a miss for most things, such as Image Playground. It just makes cartoons for the most part. Compared to what others are doing, it just seems so far behind. Writing tools is very helpful with Apple Intelligence, but everything outside of that, Genmoji is nice. You might use it a couple times, but everything outside of that just feels like it's underwhelming and something that they really need to update. With iOS 19, I've speculated for a while that the reason we didn't hear anything is because they're working on some sort of redesign. Maybe they're keeping it really close and they're not sharing it with a whole lot of people, and just a little bit has leaked out. So this makes a lot of sense that we could see a major change this year. We were expecting it last year, and I know many people say we've said this every year, but now we have 3 sources confirming it. So if they don't do it, I'm sure many people will be disappointed. However, I know many people would just be happy with a stability update. So let me know what you think of iOS 19 in the comments below. Do you want to see a full redesign? Do you think they should change the apps, leave them alone, or what would you change? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.